I'll spare you the finer details, but in short, we were hog-tied and taken to a prison cell somewhere on the eastern side of the island. The cell was a dirty pit surrounded by a circular stone wall rising high toward the open sky. There was no possibility of scaling that wall. There we sat, silently racking our brains for some way to escape, and praying that our allies would send a strong search party to our rescue. For days we lay on our backs, nervously waiting to find out our fate. We were fed only scorched rat meat, and with bare fingers we had to bury the bones ourselves to avoid being pestered by opportunist crows and cockroaches. There were no visits from the captain. Prison guards stood at the iron lattice door that blocked out our only potential escape route leading toward a long dark passageway. At times, the guards would fall asleep, or walk off in sheer boredom, looking for other pirates to entertain themselves with, or to trade booze, which they clearly had a passion for, evidenced by the stinking piles of root beer bottles covering the floor. When the guards were asleep, or out of the immediate area, we would occasionally whisper to one another words of consolation, or discuss possible escape plans, in which we had very little confidence. In an attempt to lift the spirits of the three apprentices, I decided to distract them from the situation by giving them an entertaining lesson in philosophy. I picked up an old dry bone that had been dropped into the cell by a bird passing over the tower's opening. With it, I sketched in the dirt a schematic consisting of an arrow pointing downward toward a curved line resembling a cup. "Well, since we are trapped here, we might as well do something with our time," I suggested. "Allow me to introduce to you one of the most practical philosophical concepts that has been passed down through the centuries of our organization, that being the philosophy of sword and cup." The three apprentices appeared to be intrigued, so I continued. "Think of this sketch as a schematic of the sword and cup. The arrow represents the sword, which is the masculine principle, and the curved line below it is the cup, or feminine principle. The ancients taught that the universe itself and everything in it has the polarity of masculine and feminine principles. For example, if we consider the art of fishing, to fish with a spear would be a masculine approach, while fishing with a net would be a feminine approach. As you can see, one can take either approach regardless of whether they are man or woman, although some individuals may be more naturally inclined to masculine ways and vice versa. Now, to elaborate further on the fishing analogy, hunting fish with a spear would require a great deal of time, effort, and skill. To catch fish with a net, however, takes relatively little time, skill, and effort, and yet it is very effective. A person who has never fished before would be capable of leaving a net in a strategic location and returning later to find his meal. Not so for the spearfishing method, which requires considerable skill, focus, and perseverance. Do you see? The feminine gazes widely, draws in, and captivates, whereas the masculine focuses sharply and outwardly and requires a tiring perseverance. And this philosophy of sword and cup can be extended by analogy to any art or to overcoming any obstacle. One might say it is a sort of key to the universe, in a sense. To demonstrate the power of sword and cup at a larger scale, I'll use the analogy of the conquest of nations. Suppose you had a neighboring nation that was causing you trouble, and you wanted to gain control of it for your own people's sake. The masculine approach is a rather obvious one. You would simply wage war against the nation, literally with sword in hand. But this would be very costly. You would require a large navy and highly skilled military men, and even if you did win the battle, in the process you may have gained the world and lost your soul, as they say. You will have lost many of your men, and you will have sent off your nation's most talented men to kill men in foreign lands who themselves may not have appreciated the leader of that nation either. So, When possible, it can be more effective to take the feminine approach, one that is yielding, succumbing, alluring, leveraging temptation. One could set a honey trap for the enemy king, an attractive woman to allure him into marriage and encourage him to acquire motives that suit one's nation. Or a similar approach can be accomplished through brotherly friendship or through propaganda. Both of these feminine methods have been used frequently throughout history. But the masculine approach is better known since it makes for a better story and is more obvious and straightforward. After all, who wants to hear the story of a war that never happened? The three laughed at the thought of this peculiarity of mankind before being abruptly interrupted by the miserable guard. "Oi! What are you up to?" he yelled in his grating voice from the lattice door. "You'd better not be planning anything, else you'll have to call the boss in here. Then you'll be sorry." We separated to opposing sides of the cell to avoid arousing any further suspicion. That was all it seemed to take for the guard to relax and return to pacing the passageways. As it was late afternoon, I soon fell asleep. When I woke, it was dusk, and I saw Guinevere standing at the gate chatting to the guard in a playful tone. It occurred to me that she was softening him in the hope that he would lower his guard, so to speak, and perhaps some unforeseeable opportunity would arise as a result. "Do you like riddles?" she asked the guard, who was by that time of day a little groggy, and I must admit he wasn't the most quick-witted character to begin with. The guard responded giddily. Yes, I like riddles, I do. Not as much as I like pretty girls, but—" "Well, you'll like this one then," said Guinevere. "It's perfect for a prison guard like you. You'll be telling it to all the prisoners you ever meet." "Tell me," the guard responded excitedly. "Here it is, then. Imagine you're in a room made of stone walls. The room has no windows or doors. It's just stone on every side. You don't have any tools with you. How do you escape the room?" "Kick down the wall with me legendary strength, I will," he chuckled in his drunken excitement. "Oh, no, the stone walls are too strong, even for you, sir," Guinevere replied in a flattering voice. "Yeah," he chuckled again before pausing abruptly in confusion. I don't think about it," he muttered as he turned away and paced down the passageway once again. We looked across the cell at each other, humoured by the guard's sudden change of character. "Are you softening him up?" I whispered. Guinevere smirked, as she was clearly humoured and surprised by the ease at which she could soften the guard. "Seems to be working," Henry remarked. "Look!" whispered Firefly excitedly, as he sprang towards the lattice door. Peering through the iron lattice, we discovered that the guard had dropped the key in his drunkenness. There it hung from its large keyring on the edge of a tilting bottle jutting out of a pile. "There must be some way to get it," Guinevere claimed. "If we can get the key, we can escape in the early morning before the morning shift guard is here. He's been late every morning so far since we've been here." Just then, we heard the guard's footsteps returning to our end of the passageway. Thinking fast, the four of us redirected our gaze towards the sketch in the dirt, hoping the guard wouldn't notice the key. "There you are," said the guard as he bent down to retrieve his key. "I still haven't got it yet, precious," he said, turning his head toward Guinevere. "Oh, don't tell me. I'll have nothing but you to think about then." Seeming to forget his duty, he turned again back down the passageway. As he left our sight around the bend, a metallic jangle could be heard echoing back through the passageway. The four of us looked at each other, realizing he had dropped the key again further down the passage. After losing any realistic hope of getting our hands on the key, the apprentices laid down to sleep, and I soon followed suit. Very early the next morning, when the sunlight had barely lit the cell, I woke to a familiar sound. Lying on my back, looking up toward the opening of the tower, I saw a red parrot circling in. "Persephone!" I whispered, trying not to alert the guards. Firefly heard my voice and immediately woke. He was stunned and delighted to see his feathered companion once again. The others had heard the commotion and had woken also. We squatted down around Persephone. Little things like that are so much the more entertaining when one has been starved by delight for so long. It soon occurred to me that Persephone may just have been small enough to fit through the gaps in the lattice door. But how could we get her to bring us the key that had dropped down the bend in the passageway? "That's it." "What?" asked Firefly. "Many years ago, before any of you were born, there was a lady on Cantus Island named Morgana, who had a talking parrot named Nikita. Morgana claimed to have a telepathic connection with Nikita, and she would demonstrate this convincingly to us every year at the fair. She would ask a member of the audience to randomly select one of the 3 cards she had supplied and to show it to her without allowing Nikita, the parrot, to see it. The card had either an illustration of a nut, a berry, or a flower on it, and only Morgana and the audience member could see the chosen card. The parrot could not see the card, as there was a wall between her and her keeper. When Morgana was shown the chosen card, she would focus on it, and Nikita would speak the name of the food item correctly every time, as if she could read Morgana's mind. The apprentices looked a little skeptical of this idea. I continued. Morgana believed it was her emotional connection with Nikita that enabled the 2 of them to develop a telepathic connection. Perhaps you, Firefly, have a strong enough connection with Persephone to project an image of the key to her mind's eye, and if you visualize finding the key in a passageway, there's a chance." "Well, I suppose I've seen stranger things," Firefly pondered. "Levitating cutlasses, memories of past lives. I might as well give it a try." We sat patiently while Firefly meditated on the image of the key in the passageway. After a long moment of feeling deflated by the seemingly slim chance of success, we suddenly had cause to raise our chins. Persephone, with a curious look, began to hop towards the iron door. She then slipped through a gap in the lattice and flew down the passageway and around the bend, out of sight. Incredibly, the bird soon returned, fluttering towards us, carrying the key in her beak. We cheered for her, quietly of course, before grabbing the key and hastily unlocking the door. There was no time to waste, as we feared the morning guard would soon arrive for his shift. Persephone flew back out of the top of the tower as we made our way through the passage. In the distance was a muffled sound of an argument, and as we neared the open air, I discerned it was the racket of a battle. We emerged from the tunnel to the grand sight of our own men thoroughly dominating the pirates, forcing them into a cowardly surrender. Pirates are no match for the alliance of the Heart Islands. After all was dealt with, we were hastily escorted back to the ship and sailed home alongside our allied vessels. A marvellous celebration indeed, topped by a much-needed feast. Oh, you must be wondering about that riddle. When Firefly asked Guinevere for the answer, she replied simply, "Stop imagining."